we were talking about hormones and exercise, and much more specifically, not anabolic hormones, not hormones that are going to go up after about, that are going to lead to protein synthesis and muscle growth, although those are important. They're very, very important. What we were really talking about was how we use hormones in an effort to regulate blood glucose levels, and how we regulate blood glucose is going to be very strongly related to the breakdown of glycogen and the breakdown of fat into our adipose tissue into free fatty acids, with the ultimate goal being what? Why must we regulate blood glucose? Homeostasis. Okay, sure. Here's right, homeostasis. But can we be more specific? Why regulate glucose? If you don't regulate your blood glucose, we can have glucose for the brain. Okay, what happens if the brain doesn't have glucose? No. We die. Okay, we die. First coma, then death. Okay, but in a more practical sense, right? In a more practical sense, blood glucose for the brain regulates fatigue. When blood glucose dips, brain becomes unhappy, we get central fatigue. Okay, we get central fatigue. So we need to break down glycogen so we don't use blood glucose, or to replenish the blood glucose. And we need to break down fat or release it from adipose tissue so we can use fat and therefore not use glucose. Okay? Does that part make sense? Because that's what we're trying to do and maintain during a bout of exercise, especially during longer duration. Okay? That's the big picture. That's the big picture. So we started at the end on Friday. That doesn't make any sense. That sentence was terrible. We ended on Friday talking about insulin. We're going to go through certain hormones and discuss the role that they play in regulating blood glucose. Okay. Insulin is a really important hormone for regulating blood glucose both at rest and during exercise. The job of insulin is to pull glucose from blood into muscle cells. Okay, into muscle cells. You eat something, your blood glucose goes up, right? Those of you having coffee or some sort of energy drink that has carbohydrates in it, right? You eat or you drink those things, your blood glucose rises about a half an hour later. Your pancreas releases insulin. The insulin binds to receptors on muscle tissue. Those muscles will pull glucose in, okay? Which then lowers your blood glucose, returns us to homeostasis, and there we go. All right. Now, for those of you that were here on Friday, still completely bitter about this, I'm going to bring it up all day. What happens to insulin during exercise? Do you guys remember? Tyler says it decreases. That seems weird, right? Do we think during exercise it's useful to drive glucose into a cell? I'm exercising. Do I need glucose in my bicep? Probably, sure. But yet insulin goes down. Doing this makes my insulin levels go down. Walking makes my insulin levels go down. Tyler's right. Okay? Because of something called the insulin-like effect of exercise that I have written right here. Okay? Question. This is one of the most important things that derives health benefits from exercise, period. Okay? If you are physically active for your entire life, I can't 100% guarantee that you won't be a type 2 diabetic ever. Okay. But if you are consistently physically active, because of the insulin-like effect of exercise, your risk of ever becoming a type 2 diabetic is very small. If you are a type 2 diabetic, I cannot exclusively, in all circumstances, treat you with exercise, but in about 2/3 of cases, I bet I can, especially early on, because of the insulin-like effect of exercise. If you're a type 1 diabetic, you should never take insulin and then go to exercise if you've not eaten a Snickers or something, because of the insulin-like effect of exercise. So it's good for preventing type 2, but it can be really dangerous in type 1. And what this means is, when I contract my bicep, if I had you guys get up and do squats, contracting the muscle all by itself functions just like insulin. Insulin binds its receptor. It tells these glucose receptors that are stored in your cell to move to the cell membrane to then grab the glucose and pull it in. When you contract a muscle, the exact same thing happens. Contracting muscles translocates GLUT4 to the membrane and pulls glucose into the cells. That's the insulin-like effect of exercise, or the insulin-like effect of muscle contractions. That's dangerous if you're type 1, because the insulin drives it in, the contractions drive it in, and your blood glucose can fall too much. Okay. When you're a type 2 diabetic, your insulin doesn't work very well, or the receptors, you're not very sensitive to the insulin that you make, and the muscle contractions essentially overcome all of that. Okay. And that's why insulin has to go down during a bout of exercise. Because if it doesn't, we'd all die every time. Well, we'd only die once. And every time you go to exercise and it'd just kill you. Okay. Can't die more than once, as far as we know. Okay. So that's what's going on there. Okay. Now, some of you may ask a question. Well, how does that work, Dr. Black? And the answer is we don't know. We've been studying it for 50 years. Someone someday will figure out exactly the pathway of how and why contracting a muscle leads to this, and they will win a Nobel Prize, because we will have cured diabetes when we figure this out. Okay. They've been working on it for maybe more like 60 years or something. And we have a pretty good sense. Right? We know that it works in the same signal transduction pathway. We think it's something about sort of wiggling the cell membrane, the force that's on there, kind of like what leads to the activation of mTOR. We think it's some of those same kinds of things, but they'll figure it out one day, and it will be a Nobel Prize money night. Okay? So, really important, really, really interesting stuff. Okay. Let's talk about some other hormones. There's another hormone that comes from the pancreas called glucagon. It is very often considered to be the anti-insulin. If insulin lowers blood glucose, glucagon tries to raise blood glucose. Okay? It's a peptide hormone like insulin. It comes from the pancreas, but it comes from the alpha cells, not the beta cells. And it is released when blood glucose is low. Any of you that haven't had breakfast have elevated glucagon right now. Okay? Elevated glucagon right now. It promotes the breakdown of glycogen in the liver to therefore dump glucose into the blood. It promotes fat mobilization from adipose tissue. And it promotes gluconeogenesis, so making glucose from amino acids. Okay? So all it's trying to do is to raise blood glucose by breaking down liver glycogen, by making glucose in the liver, and then to prevent us from further using more glucose by mobilizing fat. Okay? This is going to be a thing. This function is going to be a thing. Glucagon does this. Epinephrine and norepinephrine do this. To an extent, cortisol does this. Growth hormone does this. Testosterone does this. Okay. Basically, everything that's not insulin that we release during exercise is going to try to do something that looks a whole lot like this. Dump glucose in and mobilize fat. Those are kind of the two big take homes. Okay. So that's glucagon. Thyroid hormone. Thyroid hormone's a weird one. Okay. So comes in two flavors, T3 and T4. Okay. We feed my cat food that doesn't have iodine in it because she is hyperthyroid. So she makes too much T3 and T4. She eats food, that's all she gets. It doesn't have any iodine, so she doesn't make as much. And that's how we control her hyperthyroid. So, which is an interesting kind of thing. Okay, thyroid gland is here, right? Sort of on the front side of the lower part of your throat. Okay, thyroid hormone, in ways that we don't fully understand, plays a big role in regulating metabolic rate. It controls metabolic rate. If I inject you with T3 and T4, it raises your metabolic rate, and it also has behavioral consequences where in some ways it almost gives you ADHD. You get real wiggly, okay, on all of this. If you are hypothyroid and you don't make enough, metabolic rate falls, people tend to gain weight, and their behavior is they're very sluggish and slow. And they just kind of do this. Okay. So it's a really interesting kind of thing. Big role in kind of where weight tends to settle in people. Thyroid hormone, we think, is what we call a permissive hormone. And by being permissive, in some ways, it's your friend that encourages you to do certain behaviors, right? They're just like, hey, yeah, let's go do this. That sounds great. That sounds great. Let's do that. Okay. In that it allows other hormones to function to their fullest extent, especially epinephrine. Okay? Especially epinephrine. So while the thyroid hormone may not, it has some direct effects. The other thing is that we need it because it helps the other ones work to their most full extent. Okay? Most of you probably know someone who is either hypo or hyperthyroid. Hypo tends to be more common, where people, they don't make enough. And then once you get diagnosed with that, then they will give you can just take thyroid hormone every day, and they can dose your metabolic rate back up to a certain place. And then in more rare instances, people are hyper, like our cat, where they're real wired up all the time. And they're real kind of just can't move, and just I can't sit still, and I'm just wiggly. And their metabolism is really fast. Those people have a hard time. They eat all the time. They have a hard time keeping weight on, and whatnot. I had this lovely idea when we learned about thyroid hormones when I was an undergraduate physiology student, because I thought I wanted to be a doctor at that particular point. A doctor, not a doctor like I am now. That we would just, my buddy and I, we were just going to run out of our doctor's office. The brilliant ideas you have at 19. We just run like a weight loss clinic, and you just come in and you just zap the thyroid. People have a lot of cancer in their thyroid, very common. Just zap it with a radiation, knock out the thyroid, and then just dose people back with however much thyroid hormone they want, and we'll make you can be whatever weight you want to be in that particular way, right? Wildly inappropriate and dangerous, and just this awful of a thing to say. But these are the ideas that you have. You're like, oh yeah, that would be great. We could do that. Things are the ideas you have when you're 19. But that's some of the stuff that we've got there. Okay. Our next hormones are collectively called catecholamines. It's epinephrine and norepinephrine. Okay, epi and norepi. Epinephrine is sometimes called adrenaline. It used to be much more widely called adrenaline when I was y'all's age. We have mostly taken now to calling it epinephrine. They are both going to come from the adrenal medulla. Okay, and they increase and regulate metabolic rate. And then they institute what we call, or we think of commonly as the fight or flight response. Okay. And so the fight or flight response involves breakdown of liver glycogen, mobilization of fat from adipose tissue, increase in heart rate, increase in left ventricular contraction force, both of which raise cardiac output. Okay, so increasing in blood flow. They increase blood pressure, they increase breathing rate, the rate of respiration. Okay, they also tend to lead to vasodilation of blood vessels that go to skeletal muscle. So it's let's dump metabolic substrate into the blood in glucose and fat, and then let's increase cardiac output and then increase the amount of that cardiac output that goes to skeletal muscle. It is there because, right, I'm going to tell Soren that I'm gonna get it because he's wearing his headphones while I'm sitting here talking, right? And immediately then he's like, "Whoo, okay, I'm gonna get you." You got to think about fight or flight is less so now, right? Today's society, but think of it as 10,000 years ago, and there's a bear, right, or something that you've got to run. Well, we don't really want to fight a bear. Like, you got to run away. Something like all of that. Okay, that's the idea behind the fight or flight response. Okay, does that make sense? You guys have heard about fight or flight. We have some sense. We'll talk a whole lot more about the effects of epinephrine and norepinephrine when we get into the cardiovascular system starting on Wednesday. Okay, it plays a very, very large role in regulating heart rate and blood pressure and all of those things. Okay. I can just immediately pick on one of y'all and have you stand up and I make your heart rate go up because I evoke a stress response by trying to let everybody in the class look at you. Those things. Okay. So that's what's going on there.
Veer's got a question.
Pardon? Veer's got a question. Yes, Veer.
You know, like nowadays they say it's like fight, flight, or freeze.
Yes.
Is that freeze because of the lack of catecholamine release, or is that a different?
It's your response to freeze. I mean, it's your response to all of those things, right? Fight, flight, freeze. You ever been really, really stressed and you feel like your brain doesn't work right, you can't think straight, and all of those things, and so then the response is to do nothing. You can learn to, in some ways, overcome all of that in those particular ways. So that's more of what it's not a lack of all of that. It's a direct response to those things, but a lot of it is, right, we don't have to fight or flee very often in our lives now, do we? And so sometimes now our response is to just sort of like, well, I don't know what to do. So that's my guess. But I'm not an expert. That's probably more of a psychological kind of thing. I will plug now, because of this, if anybody wants to know a little bit more, because Veer said fight, flight, or freeze, some colleagues and I are giving a presentation. I think it's next Tuesday in the history department, the Schusterman Center for Judaic Studies. We have a project that we did at the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., where we gave people at the museum a tracker that they wore, like a special watch that they wore, and we measured their fight or flight response as they went around to the various sort of museum sites, the various exhibits in the museum, and then we've overlaid sort of how much of an epinephrine and norepinephrine response we get at each individual location. Then we ask them some questions and all of this onto the museum to try to talk about and then ask them what they remember from the museum and those kinds of things. And let me just tell you, if you'd like to stress people out, go to the Holocaust Museum. It's a very stressful sort of, and that I would hope that makes sense to everybody, right? Like you just learn about a lot of awful things, but we do all of that. So I can measure this, not cortisol, in you guys by something called the galvanic skin response, right? When you get stressed, what do? You sweat, right? That's one of the other responses. And so by running an electrical current across your skin, I can, when you begin to sweat, or even as sort of you're pre-sweating, before you even notice that you've done it, it lowers the resistance to current movement across your skin so that the current travels faster. And so we can measure something that's called an electrodermal activity with an EDA response. And that's how we can try to quantify this without having to take like a blood sample or anything. So that's what the watch that they wore would do, is it would check and basically see when and how much were they sweating and what kind of spikes were we getting on all of those things. We piloted it by putting it on some of our grad students when they had to give talks in front of the department and see what it would look like on everything. So anyway, that's next Tuesday at lunch. If you're interested, you guys should think about coming over to the history department. I'll try to put a link in class. I have colleagues, one woman at the University of Florida who does museum studies, and then another colleague who's here who is in architecture. I was just the data person. It's their idea. They're very interested in how do you design a museum that goes over stressful things like all of this, these heritage sites, and so that people can remember, they can get the experience that you want and remember and take away the stuff that you want from the museum. What we basically figured out was that we overwhelm them on the first floor and everybody shuts down. That's the fight, flight, or freeze. They're freezing in a lot of ways. And that's maybe something you want to think about when you design things. So I was merely the physiologist who was there. It's all their other activities. Okay. Cortisol. Good question, Beer. Thank you. Cortisol comes from the adrenal cortex. It is a steroid hormone. Okay. So up until now, everything else has been a peptide hormone. This is a steroid hormone, so it's got a cholesterol base. Okay. If you haven't had breakfast, your cortisol is up. It maintains plasma glucose in between meals, partially by mobilizing fat, by doing gluconeogenesis. Okay. And it very much leads to catabolism. Cortisol leads to the breakdown of proteins. Okay. This sometimes gets it a bad name. People will say if your cortisol is chronically high, are you going to have a hard time building muscle and whatnot? It's a little bit more complicated than that. It also functions to blunt inflammation. Okay. Anybody ever taken they come in what are called dose packs, but you've taken prednisone or something like that, or had a cortisone shot into a muscle, right? We give them what are called corticosteroids. They blunt inflammation. And sometimes like I get really bad sinus infections. And if it's a viral sinus infection, all they can really do, right? They can't give you an antibiotic for it, but they will sometimes give like prednisone or something. And what it does is it blunts the inflammation, and it then can help you kind of clear out all the stuff that you get caught in your sinuses. I've also had 2 cortisone shots in my throwing shoulder from baseball. That was super fun. As I mentioned last week, if anybody wants to feel what it's like to hear the head of your humerus crunch into your acromion process, just come down. You can palpate, you can feel it. It's not great, okay, but it blunts the inflammation. So that's the other piece on all of this that we have to consider. Okay, so there is some use for cortisol in these things in sports, or at least things that approximate what cortisol looks like. Again, this is how old these things are. This was a popular television show when I originally put this together in like 2006. But growth hormone, which comes from the anterior pituitary, okay, and there are pituitary dwarfs and pituitary giants, so people that don't make any or very, very little growth hormone. This family is on here, had a television show. That's the Roloffs. They lived in I think in Oregon or Washington or somewhere. But if you don't make enough growth hormone, then you can be a pituitary dwarf. You can also be a pituitary giant, which there's a picture of this gentleman who at the time, I believe, was the tallest person in the world. Overexpression of growth hormone leads to bone growth. And so people that are have pituitary giantism, have really bad joints and bones, and their feet are usually misshapen. and things. It's not as cool as just I'm super tall, so maybe I can be a basketball player or something like that. But from an exercise standpoint, growth hormone increases amino acid transport, it increases protein synthesis, but it decreases the action of insulin, which is going to be good for us. But the other thing that it does is growth hormone during exercise leads to the breakdown of adipose tissue. And we know when you exercise, the growth hormone goes up. And so it's going to lead to mobilization of fat out of adipose tissue. So that can be a sort of a positive thing in that particular way. Okay. Okay. Now, what we're going to do here, yep, we got plenty of time. We're going to revisit our goals during exercise. Okay. We want to match glucose uptake into the muscles by release of glycogen from the liver. We want to spare or not use muscle glycogen. And to do that and to not use glucose, we're going to try to increase the use of fat for energy. Okay. So what I want you guys to think about and talk about, and you're going to come and write it up on the board here in just a minute, is how might changing hormone levels during exercise accomplish these goals? So close your laptops, close your phones, close all your stuff. Okay. We're going to get with the folks that are around you. We're going to turn this in today. Okay. And what I want you to do very quickly is to make a list of the hormones that we've talked about so far. And I want you to write down, how do they change during exercise? Do you think they go up? Do they go down? Do they stay the same? And then what, as it relates to these two things, glycogen breakdown, fat breakdown, blood glucose use, are they going to do by that particular change? Okay. All right. So
Especially the 17.
Like of the hormones, sorry, how do they work to increase or spare muscle glycogen and to preserve blood glucose?
How do they work to mobilize?
That's good.
What? Glycogen storage?
Preserve glycogen stores and then preserve blood glucose levels for the brain, right?
forgetting one?
It goes down deep.
No.
About the 5 related to me.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want.
Yeah, okay.
And like,
So it's
the exercise we did.
So. It doesn't.
Oh yeah, maybe, and don't forget,
Yeah, so it doesn't.
on the worksheet I have for the hormones. I have a table for them to do this with, like counteract. So.
Using.
Yeah.
Cortisol can do. I think it's. Also, it's up to 6 and T2, I think it's. Oh, no, it's T6 or T6. Kind of, long we get down.
Okay, so BLY is the function.
I don't know.
But insulin.
I can say.
Increased respiration. I guess that's too much. Yeah.
Rainbow aerobics is.
It was like.
Run P and
Little.
So it's like.
One other six, seven joke.
Doesn't have any specific action. It's just like it generally increases the pain.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Like, has that.
This all helps. Yeah. That's physical strength. Like when you work out your cortisol level. There's like a physical stress response.
Let's go see.
Okay, so cortisol is like, increase in blood glucose.
Skeletal muscles, yeah.
Which. Different methods.
Yeah, yeah, I know.
It thoroughly increases fat. That was a big thing.
So we don't have to write higher relationships at all.
Because now. Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Pick a group.
I don't know.
You don't know?
Let's hear from Abby's group over here.
Okay. Y'all, go write what happens to insulin. My group far in the back. Here. Y'all come do glucagon.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. My group behind Montserrat, y'all there. Y'all come do the third one. What's third? Y'all come do epi and norepi. Them, I don't care. Just one of the groups. Somebody. Okay, Anastasia's coming. It was not the group I was intending, but that's okay. It's fine.
You hate us? You hate us, you're not?
What?
Well, I'm just kidding.
I don't know. No, I just y'all volunteered. We didn't even have to.
Yeah.
We'll do that. Guys, y'all come, Zach. Y'all come do thyroid. Okay. The group behind y'all. Y'all are gonna come and do cortisol. Okay.
I don't know if you saw it.
Yes, I did. I should have. I was like, because I left them open until I went and actually resolved. So
Waiting for the weekend, so I
is the
figured-
grade in? Have you checked is the grade in?
No, it's not. And that's why, but thank you so much for Understanding the situation.
Remind me of your last name. please.
That's what's odd.
That's my always rolls of the last name. But I thought, okay, I'm very sorry because I got confused a second ago when I said your name and then you turned around. I was like,
We're both down.
that's right. I knew it. Okay,
Yeah.
gosh.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And we're best friends, so it's a little bit complicated. And we do like everything together. And we're both HES majors, so yeah, it's good.
I got you. I will get that fixed.
Thank you so much. Did you go to the game?
Never been to an OU game.
Yeah.
Did you go, Joy?
I did not. I was working.
Well, you would have seen this.
I mean, that would have, I'm sad that I missed you. I will say that.
It's been like over a week. Yeah, strongly worded email.
Strongly worded emails. Those are my favorite kinds of emails.
Yeah. Hey, you guys were just like. Wait, like, you put like, no.
I had an interview.
Okay. That's great. I'm
An
glad.
email would have been nice.
Email would have been nice.
You let us know that.
I'm sorry, my bad. He told me to take notes and then I didn't show him.
The chair didn't know. See?
I wrote that.
Not bad enough if the school didn't come.
It's like.
Your test back.
It's not that.
He was supposed to bring him today, but forgot him. You'll need to come by the office if you want to see him today. Yeah.
I'm like,
Guilt, shame. Are you a sociopath? That's what we want to know. You experience these
No,
emotions.
you're okay.
it's so many good grades I've been getting. That allowed me to be after that.
There we go. There we
Can't
go.
do too good. Can't make my hands. I'm good.
I'll make sure you get it too.
Don't make me make
I
you
know. I'm better this week. He's better.
Like, I'm not, because I propose tomorrow, so I'm very not doing this. Yes. No. Not at all. You said what? Like in our department. Not, not like my thesis proposal.
Okay.
My thesis, not.
That's exciting.
Yes. Yeah, that's not a problem.
Okay. Now. Does anyone in any group think that something written on the board is wrong? Y'all have very lovely but small handwriting. I appreciate that. Does anybody think something's wrong? Because there are things that are wrong. So I will offer an opportunity either for the groups that think they wrote something that's wrong to come back, or if you think you can correct something, you can come and use the red pen and fix it. No one?
Go down to my one.
I got it.
I could be part.
So, all right, fine. I'll even give you all hints, right? That's right. Well, the red mark, that sucks.
Oh, we've got another.
We have the other one. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's wrong. That's right. That's right.
Is the
This
court,
is like halfway right.
is the cortisol one halfway right?
Yeah, it's like halfway right. Okay. This is again like only part. That's right. That one's definitely wrong. That one's right. Who thinks they can fix? Who thinks you can fix here? What's wrong with the glucagon? Anti-insulin increases blood glucose. That's like halfway right. It's not the full story.
Does it also specifically stimulate gluconeogenesis?
It does. And
Is it like extracting blood glucose from the liver and
Which is
From-
called.
glycogen stores?
okay.
Exactly.
So it needs to be increase liver glycogen breakdown. Okay. I'm gonna write just gluconeo. I can't spell because I'm an idiot. Okay. And there's one other thing that's wildly important. How else could we not use blood glucose? What would we need to break down so that we don't use the glucose that's in our blood? We use something else.
Mobilizes fat instead.
It mobilizes fat. Okay.
Are we turning these papers in?
Yes.
I'm gonna read letters.
I don't care at this point if what you have written down is right or wrong. You're welcome to check, but this is just, you were here, you participated. Okay, for that. Okay. Epinephrine and norepinephrine was also sort of halfway right. Yes, it increases metabolic rate. What else does it do? Fat mobilization, heart rate.
Wait,
Blood pressure?
Blood pressure,
increases respiratory rate.
respiration,
Heart rate.
heart rate.
Glycogen breakdown.
Yep. So it's all of these. Okay, plus cardiac output. Okay. We got thyroid right, and then cortisol is a tough one. Cortisol's tough because it's weird. So we wrote that it's halfway right that cortisol goes up with exercise. If going up is only halfway right, what else must it also do? Yeah, it goes up and it goes down. So it's very, very strange. Cortisol goes up at the start, and then eventually it falls. So that's real weird. No way you guys would have known that without having seen the graph. Which if you looked ahead, right, which I would never have done as a student, then there's no reason. So it goes up and then it comes down. Now, I imagine what happened here was that we confused what happens with cortisol with what happens with epinephrine and norepinephrine. With the other adrenal, this comes from the adrenal cortex. This comes from the adrenal medulla. So we've kind of got these things flipped around. So who thinks they know what does cortisol do? It doesn't increase cardiac output or increase respiration or sweating. What does it do?
Increases protein breakdown.
It breaks down protein, that's right. Okay.
Reduces inflammation.
It does decrease inflammation. Which is not always a great thing during exercise, but the big thing is, right, it mobilizes, it breaks down protein. That's the big deal. Okay. And then my growth hormone group, y'all got that one right. So this is great. Okay, this is great. So on the hormone worksheet, Ty has a chart that looks a whole lot like this. Okay, that you guys will fill out again. It's going to add in what's the what is the endocrine organ from whence these things come from. Okay. So I appreciate you guys trying. I appreciate you guys being good sports after having seen things for one time to come up and do all of that. Adam.
So just to clarify, it's a little confusing, the glucagon plus the arrow, is that also increasing metabolic rate, and then thyroid increases cardiac output, increases?
Oh, no. Sorry. So what we're seeing, as I should have done, so epinephrine and norepinephrine will increase metabolic rate.
Okay.
What I was trying to denote was that epinephrine and norepinephrine also break down liver glycogen, drive gluconeogenesis, mobilize fat, and they increase cardiac output through increasing heart rate
Thank you.
and stroke volume. Okay.
And then does cortisol also increase fat breakdown?
Yes, cortisol should do fat breakdown and protein breakdown. Okay. Collectively, glucagon, epi and norepi, cortisol, and growth hormone can be called counter-regulatory hormones. They do the opposite of insulin, right? They're going to help us counter the effect of insulin, which wants to drive glucose into the cell. They all collectively work against that to maintain or increase blood glucose levels. So if you want to look, in the slides, there are graphs that show the changes in all of these, okay? You can see glucose and insulin, and this is over time. Insulin falls, blood glucose stays the same. Here's all the counter-regulatory ones, but growth hormone together. You can see the blue is blood glucose, and we've got, right, glucagon goes up, epinephrine goes up, norepinephrine goes up, and then cortisol does this weird up to about a half an hour, and then it starts to come down over time, probably to limit the protein breakdown. Okay. This shows changes in epi and norepi. You really want to get a spike in epinephrine and norepinephrine, go for a sprint. Okay. This giant sprint, like at a, you're at 100% of VO2 max, 110% of VO2 max. You do a sprint, you get a big spike, right? If you go much, much lower, like you're walking, it's going to go up, but it's going to be much, much less so, right? Big, big stress response from high intensity kinds of things. Okay. So we've done those. We talked about this. This is showing the changes in free fatty acids. This shows glycogen depletion, which I'm not going to ask many questions about. Okay. Let me do really, really quickly. Now we've got like a minute. We'll talk about fluid balance at the kidneys, and then we'll get into the cardiovascular system on Wednesday. Okay. Good deal. Please make sure you turn in what you did today, or you email it to us so we can get that turned in. If you still need to see your test, please come to the office. Okay.